What is going on, everyone? It's the Game Week 20 preview, and we're going to jump straight into it with a question that a lot of people have been talking about this week. Should we triple captain Haaland? We know he's fit and there's good rest time between fixtures. So just to remind ourselves, they've got Man United away on Saturday at 12:30. That's the early kickoff. And then they don't play Spurs until Thursday evening. So that looks pretty good. They do have Carabao Cup on Wednesday evening before the Man United game. And the turnaround time between Spurs and then Wolves in Game Week 21 is pretty quick, but given that it is games against Man United and Spurs, you would expect Pep Guardiola to put out a pretty much full strength 11, and that's going to include the likes of De Bruyne and of course Haaland as well. So that all sounds pretty great. Now I personally don't think that City are going to go and score 4 or 5 goals against either Man United or Spurs, but I also don't think that matters either. I think most of us would agree there's a good chance that Haaland will score against Man United and Spurs as well. And if he doesn't get a yellow card and he makes it past 60 minutes in both games, that's 12 points already. That's before you think about possible bonus points, and of course the fact that he could score more goals than that and get assists as well. So I think that sounds pretty good, right? 12 points plus for triple captain wouldn't be so bad. Of course we all want 25 plus and something like that, but 12 plus will be a pretty good start, knowing that Haaland is capable of more. The key question is, will there be a better time to play the chip? Now we already know that Man City have a confirmed double in Game Week 23 as well, which is Villa at home and Arsenal away. Now on paper that might look slightly better because you've got the Villa game there, although obviously Arsenal away is harder than both Man United and Spurs so far this season. But all those factors come into play. Will Haaland still be fit? If he is fit, will De Bruyne still be fit? And obviously Man City have got a great squad. They don't need De Bruyne to win games, but he is a massive help to how Haaland will perform. They've got a really good understanding together. And straight away you can see you've got a Saturday, Thursday turnaround here, but for this one it's Sunday, Wednesday. So the turnaround is not quite as good, which means minutes might be managed more often. And of course Haaland could be injured. Now, in the future, they might get... And I'm kind of mostly sticking to Haaland because I know that in previous seasons, Salah has been a triple captain opportunity, and that might be the case this year if Liverpool's doubles are that good. But most people are going to want to put it on Haaland, and they might, on paper, get better fixtures like in, past Game Week 30, because there are more double game weeks to come. But we're just not so sure what the state of Haaland and Man City will be at that point. And it's not just that; they could be involved in Europe. That could see minutes being managed as well. And so I, as you can probably hear from how I'm talking, I'm coming around to the idea of using the triple captain chip now. I don't know what it is about triple captains, but people kind of seem to get confused and overcomplicated what the chip is. You just get one extra score. So if Haaland scores 10 points, your triple captain is worth 10 points because you could have captained him anyway. And I'll try and explain that here. Just for anyone that is worried about missing out on more points later on, it's probably not going to be as bad as you think, okay? So let's say in Game Week 20 for the double, Haaland gets 13 points. And let's say in Game Week 34, by the way, this is not confirmed or anything, I'm just making it up. Let's say he gets 21 points, which obviously sounds much better than getting 13. So in Game Week 20, if you captain him, you get 26. And if you triple captain him, you get 39. In Game Week 34, if you captain him, you get 42. And if you triple captain him, you get 63. That sounds massive, right? There's a huge difference between the triple captain score in Game Week 20 and Game Week 34. But what you have to remember is if you use your triple captain now, you can still captain him later on. So when you look at what that actually means, if you were to triple captain now for that 13-pointer and only captain him in Game Week 34 where he gets 21 points, you will have got from Haaland only 81 points. Let's say you got it right and you only captained him this week, you saved your triple captain for that 21-point score, you would get 89 points. The difference is only 8 points, and that is the key thing. People always forget with this conversation, you can still captain that player later on. The score might look better on paper with the screenshots on Twitter and stuff like that, and obviously you'd rather have 8 points than not, but it's not a big deal. It's almost to me like securing the points now rather than waiting later on. And it's not just about whether Haaland will be a better captain later, it's also about whether there'll be a better use of chips later on. So there will be more double game weeks and possibly bigger ones with better fixtures, but it might be that using your free hit or using your wild card or using your bench boost is a better strategy later on. So I don't think it's a no-brainer to use the triple captain right now, because obviously Man United and Spurs are teams that could possibly keep City out, right? There could possibly be 2 clean sheets, even if it's not likely. likely. So I get why people might want to save it, but there's lots of factors which kind of point towards the fact that it's probably as good a time as any to use it right now. But let me know in the comments below, what are you doing? Okay, so for the next few game weeks, which premiums are better? Salah versus De Bruyne and Darwin versus Kane. Now, because of his price, I wouldn't necessarily class Darwin as a premium option, but let's just go with it anyway. Kane has a guaranteed double in game week 20. You know he's always going to start. His minutes are good, and he's on penalty. So he is clearly the better option. I know Darwin Nunez's minutes are pretty good right now, but Gakpo is now an option that Klopp can use as well. And once Firmino is back fit, that could reduce the amount of minutes that Darwin gets. It's not to say that I think he'll suddenly start being bench more often than not. It just means that his time on the pitch might be slightly reduced. I think Liverpool's fixtures in general are probably slightly better than Spurs, although Brighton away and Chelsea at home is not necessarily great on paper, but after that it looks a little bit better. But I think Kane wins. But obviously you've got to take price into account, and if Liverpool do get a double in game week 21, which is a possibility, not necessarily guaranteed, and hopefully we'll find out before the deadline anyway, then maybe you could look to keep him and bank that extra kind of 2.5 million. But if it is just a straight up choice, then Kane wins every single time for me. Salah versus De Bruyne is a little bit harder because I think all those factors I've just talked about Kane are the same for Salah. We know he's on penalties. He hasn't had one this season. Surely Liverpool are due a penalty sooner rather than later. I think his minutes are probably slightly better than De Bruyne. I don't think De Bruyne is going to miss out that much, but City obviously got a good few fixtures, so he could find himself, you know, taken off a little bit earlier, maybe miss one odd game. I just don't think Klopp has got the same luxury for Liverpool with Salah. So overall, I still think Salah is a better option than De Bruyne, despite at times that not working this season. But Man City have got a guaranteed double in 20. We know they've got another one in 23. If you're looking at the next kind of 4 to 5 game weeks, although I think it's probably quite close, I would just go for those extra fixtures and just take De Bruyne instead. So Kane wins quite easily if you're not taking price into account, which you absolutely have to. And then for Salah and De Bruyne, if I was picking right now, I'd go for De Bruyne. What I would say is, I don't know what this question is leading to, but a lot of people are looking at doing Salah to De Bruyne. I don't think that's necessarily a bad move, but if you could get 3 other City players you're happy with, you could get those extra fixtures another way and then still keep Salah as well. Whereas obviously if you go for De Bruyne, there's not necessarily a huge amount of, you know, really good Liverpool options too. Gakpo might be one, and obviously Darwin Nunez is quite good as well. That depends on how easy you can get to him, but it's not necessarily a straight up choice between those two. But if you were picking right now, or you were wildcarding or something like that, and it was either Salah or De Bruyne, then I would just go for De Bruyne for sure. So why take a -4 for Kane if you already own Man City and Arsenal defenders? Now, I've been asked this type of question a lot over the years of making videos, and I think people look at it the wrong way. You almost have to forget that you own an Arsenal and Man City defender when you're making your decision. Kane may or may not be the best option, but you've got to be open-minded that he might be the best player to bring in, even though you own those defenders. So let's say you've got Ben White from Arsenal and you've got John Stones from Man City. The way people kind of worry about this is, I've got those 2 defenders. If I bring in Harry Kane and he scores in both games, they will lose their clean sheet. And unless they get attacking returns, they will blank, right? But guess what? If you don't bring in Harry Kane and he scores in both games, you still lose your clean sheet. Apart from you also don't have Harry Kane's goals, and he might have been the best option you can bring in. And that's all you are worried about. What is the best upgrade I can make for this team, not only for this week, but also for the long term, that doesn't hurt my own transfer plans? And obviously that is going to be very, very team dependent, but I'm going to show you an example here. Let's say this is my team. So again, I've got Ben White and I've got John Stones. Let's just pretend that my whole bench is injured, so they're no use to me whatsoever. I've already made a transfer, and Ivan Toney, who's my forward, is also not available for game week 20. So I've got 4 outfield players and none of them are going to play. So I've got to choose what is my best transfer. Now, if money was unlimited and you were looking to swap Toney for someone else, and you've already got Haaland, surely Harry Kane is the best pick you can go for. And it doesn't matter that you've already got Stones and Ben White. That decision should be independent. John Stones could go and get a clean sheet against Man United, lose one against Spurs, and end up on 8 points. And in that same game against Spurs, Harry Kane could go and get a goal, 3 bonus points. He's got 9 points or whatever he gets against Arsenal. Ultimately, he's the best forward choice you can make outside of Haaland. You might think that Darwin Nunez is better. That's absolutely fine. I'm just going to try and provide an example here. Now, the other thing you could do is go for a different forward. But then I feel like you're just making a worse pick just because you're worried about your clean sheets this week. Bearing in mind, you've still got these defenders for plenty more weeks where they might be great, because players don't get points every single week. I think people tend to think that they do, but they don't. So if White blanks this week and you've bought Harry Kane, that doesn't matter, because Ben White might be very useful to you in future weeks. The other option would be to just hold Tony and go for a different defender instead. So let's just say you do Bueno to Luke Shaw, you bench Tony, and you go for that. And obviously you're hoping for the biggest upside at that point, that Harry Kane blanks and then you get Ben White and Stones clean sheets. But you've got to think about what's more realistic. So in this case, it then comes down to, do I want Ben White and Luke Shaw for game week 20, or do I want Ben White and Harry Kane? So it's Shaw versus Kane. I think most people would take Harry Kane. And that is kind of how you've got to look at this question. So I get it. You don't want all three of those players because the chances are they won't all get points, but it is still possible. Ben White might get an assist, John Stones could get a goal, Harry Kane gets a goal in both games, White's out of their clean sheets, happy days, they all get points, right? Ultimately, you make the best transfer for your team, and if getting Harry Kane doesn't block you from making future moves and you think he's the best long-term option for your budget, then that is the player that you should go for. Whether or not you should take a -4 is a bit of a different kind of thing, because obviously it's a difficult double, you're probably not going to captain him, but in that scenario I showed you, I still think you're probably worth a -4 even if you've got those defenders. So that's the kind of thing to try and think about. Hopefully that made sense. So is it worth bringing in defenders that are likely to concede when the double game week fixtures are tough? And the short answer, I think, is yes, because the potential for points in double game weeks are higher because of having two fixtures, even if they are tougher. And I'll come on to that in a minute. Obviously, there are loads of factors that go into whether you should buy a player. If you're considering someone for this double game week, will their minutes be good? Will their minutes be good longer term? What are the fixtures like, etc.? You can look into that for any player that you're considering. But for this question, I'm going to use John Stones as an example. And let's say that he'll start both games and his minutes are going to be fairly good going forward. It's just that he's got two tough fixtures this week in Man United away and Spurs at home. So I look at those fixtures on paper. Obviously, I've got Cancelo. He might not play both games. It doesn't matter for this. But I look at both of those games on paper and I think there is a chance that they concede in both games. Probably a very good chance. But as long as Man City don't go and concede a huge amount of goals and John Stones plays over 60 minutes, he could come away with 4 points without any clean sheet. Now you could turn around and say, yeah, but a single game week player with a really good chance of a clean sheet could come away with 6 points, and that is true, but just because the fixture is better does not mean that the clean sheet is guaranteed. So just the same as Man City have probably got a good chance, I would say, of conceding in both games, there is a chance that they don't do that. Similarly, if a team's got a good chance of a clean sheet, there is also a chance that they don't get the clean sheet. So I look at it more glass half full. The John Stones kind of starts on 4 points. I mean, they are tough fixtures, so maybe the likelihood of a yellow card is higher. But even if you got a yellow card in one of those games, it's still 3 points, and that's before attacking returns. And that's on the idea that they do concede in both games. If they concede in one and not the other, then you're suddenly looking at potentially 8 points plus before attacking returns and before bonus points as well. So even without all that, it still comes back to the same thing as with Harry Kane. You've got to make the best pick for your side, and that is probably a double game week defender with good fixtures to come afterwards that also plays in a good team. So I will do my team selection video tomorrow, but let's say that I didn't want to use a transfer on Mason Mount, but I want to bench him. Well, I could play Ben White and use a transfer on Patterson or James, but Ben White's got Spurs away and I've got 2 free transfers. So the chances are I will just want to bench Ben White for another day, put him second on my bench, maybe bench Mason Mount, and I've got 2 free transfers to use on James and Patterson. So who are my best options? Is it a double game week defender like John Stones, like Luke Shaw? And look, Luke Shaw could keep a clean sheet against Palace, but obviously Man City's going to be tough. But let's say you think they're going to concede in both of those games, Man United. Is Luke Shaw still a better option than the other single game week players this week? I would say probably yes. If you look at the fixtures, I've already got Trippier. I could double up with someone like Botman. But again, is Botman better than Stones? Is he better than Shaw? Is he better than them long term? Possibly not, so I would take the risk. And when you look through most of these other fixtures, there's probably not too many players that I want to bring in, right? Maybe someone like Trent, but Brighton away is not going to be easy. Liverpool are not keeping a huge amount of clean sheets. Ultimately, even with those tougher fixtures, because of the potential for extra points, because they got good fixtures to come and they play play for good teams, those defenders are still the best use of my transfers. Whether or not they're worth hits to you, that is really going to depend on your team. But I think, yes, it is worth bringing them in, even though there is probably a slightly better chance of them conceding than not. There is still a chance that they don't. It's a double game week, so I had to include this question because it comes up every time. How many double game week players do we need? Should we be taking hits to get more in if we only have 3 or 4? Now, there is never a set number of the double game week players that you need, and there is no need about it, right? It's all going to depend on your team. It's not just about who you're bringing in, it's about who you're taking out as well. If you are taking out a good single game week player that is also extremely good for the long term because of minutes, fixtures, etc., and you're bringing in a double game week player you're not really sure about and is not going to be good for you long term, then you probably shouldn't go for them. Like a lot of people, for example, are going to be considering something like Mitrovic to Martial. Now, I would definitely say that Martial, as long as he's fit, is a better option than Mitrovic for this week. But going forward, if Man United don't get that double in game week 22, which is a possibility, I would say that Mitrovic is probably the better long-term option. And if it's for a -4, that might not be worth it. I am someone that really likes double game weeks, so I like going for as many as possible. But that's the kind of thing you have to think about. And obviously, I can't go through each individual player that you might be thinking about taking out and might be thinking about bringing in. But ultimately, whoever you bring in, whether it's for free or for a hit, they should be good for the double game week and in some way good for you in the long term, or at least not block you from doing something else you might need to do. Because remember, there's not just points to be gained this week, there's points to be gained in game week 21 and 22. And if you spend all your money now and then you can't do a transfer in 21 that would have been worth even more points, that's not great. So sometimes it's worth taking a little bit of a hit, and there's no pun intended, I don't mean a literal 4-point hit, but taking a little bit of a hit on points that maybe other people get this week to then gain more in the future. That's what you got to think about for your own team. Now, again, using my team as an example, there's issues here, right? Let's say, for example, so this is how I'm set up right now. Obviously, I would play Ben White, whatever. Let's say I'm absolutely convinced that Cancelo doesn't start in either game and John Stones does, right? Of course, Cancelo's got a double, but if he's not going to play, he's not worth it for me. So I'm going to put John Stones in. Okay, now that would give me Stones and Trippier and Ben White, but Ben White's got Spurs away. I'm willing to use another transfer to not have to play him because I had 2 free transfers. So I do James to Shaw, right? Not a problem at all. But again, I'm then having to play Trippier, Stones and Shaw, and I'm on a 3-5-2. Well, Mason Mount didn't play against Man City in game week 19. Obviously, I'm recording this on Wednesday. Chelsea will play their second game of double game week 19 against Fulham. If Mount plays that, maybe I'm okay with him. But if he doesn't play that game, and it looks like he's a minutes issue going forward, well, I can probably afford to take a hit to remove him as well, because there's no guarantee that he plays. There's no guarantee he gets to 90 minutes. So I might end up bringing in Anthony. Now, I don't necessarily think, because he's a similar price, right? I don't necessarily think that Anthony is a great option for most people, but I'm on a 3-5-2. So unless I really want to switch to 3-4-3 soon, which maybe I will, and again, I'll go through this properly in tomorrow's video, I can afford to take that punt and then maybe look to move him on to a Rodrigo for Leeds or something else, or someone else later on. So suddenly I'm on a -4, and I've taken out Cancelo, who I don't think is playing either game. I've taken out James, who's injured, and Mason Mount, who's not going to, who might not play. So that's 3 transfers I think I can justify. You might have a much better squad than me. Well, you might not need all these transfers, but I'm just trying to give you an example. Now, I might get really giddy and excited and think, okay, could I take more hits? And I might look at my goalkeepers. Now, Kepa, I think, is a pretty good option. His minutes are pretty good going forward. The fixtures are decent, but there's no double game weeks on the horizon. Whereas Man City, and I've only got 2 players, Stones and Haaland, they've got a double game week this week and in 23. So I might view it that a 4-point hit for Edison not only might get repaid this week, but might get repaid over the next few weeks where they got another double, and they are just a better defence. Chelsea defence is not necessarily that good, so I might take that hit as well. And then obviously it comes down to certain things like, okay, if I bring Edison in, then it blocks me from getting a third City player without getting rid of one of them. That's all things that you'll have to consider. But suddenly I've taken a -8, and I don't think it's necessarily that bad. I probably wouldn't need to do too much more after that, but you know, there are things that you could do. If I didn't bring in Anthony, and Man United had that kind of second double in game week 22 confirmed, so they had 2 doubles in 3 game weeks, maybe I would bring in Martial instead and either bring him in for Greenwood and possibly bench someone else, or even bring him in for Mitrovic instead. So the number of double gaming players you need is not really a thing. It never is, and it never kind of will be. But obviously, triple Man City, if you can get the right players, looks good because they're just great anyway. They got another double coming. I think Man United players are very good value right now, so having a double or a triple up looks pretty good. No one's ever going to say that Harry Kane is a bad option. If you want to take a punt on a Spurs defender, that's okay as well. But I think the max most people are going to have is like 6 to 7. I think realistically, most people will have kind of 4 to 6 as the absolute maximum. So don't worry too much. Just again, I know this has kind of been the theme of this video. You've just got to look at who you're taking out and who you're bringing out. I know it sounds simple, but some people are going to need no hits this week. Some people are probably even going to roll a transfer. Other people might take a -4, -8, -12. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. If you've enjoyed that video, give it a like, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.